Welcome back to News Talk. Democrats in Montgomery County are crying foul. They say Republican members of the Board of Elections are using their clout to close early voting centers to gain partisan advantage in the next election. Joining us now with more on this, two members of the Board of Elections. Jim Shalek is a Republican member. David Naiman is a Democrat. Welcome to you both. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
David, let me begin with you. What's the accusation? What happened in the last couple of days to make this such a big issue in Montgomery County?
Well, what happened was that the board voted to move the early voting sites from places that were more populous to places that were less populous, from places that were more served by public transportation to places that were less served by public transportation, from places where people go in their daily lives to places where they don't. And as a result, as Jim acknowledged to the County Council on October the 1st, fewer voters are going to be able to use early voting.
Why do you think this happened?
I think you'd have to ask Jim why this happened.
Jim, why did this happen?
Well, no, we're hoping that more voters use what we did. First, it's important to note that the present board approved 7 of the 9 sites previously approved by the former board. We moved 2 sites, and our goal was geographic diversity, to move sites to areas that never had early voting, Potomac and Olney. They never had it. Olney is a growing, diverse community. Potomac is an old, staid, very influenced and active community. So we wanted to expand the geographic diversity.
So who were the 2 losers? And you've identified the 2 winners. Who were the 2 losers, so to speak?
We took out Burtonsville and Bethesda. However, let me note that I'm willing to compromise. I'm willing to compromise with the Democrats regarding those 2 sites.
Your read on the sites that were closed, what sort of history did they have in terms of turnout?
They had very strong turnout. The Burtonsville site was the 2nd highest turnout in the 2014 election.
So the 2nd highest site was closed.
Right, and Bethesda was a new site in the 2014 election, but also did quite well. What Jim is talking about, he says he hopes that more people will vote, but he's moving from a site in Bethesda that has 30,000 more people of voting age who live near it than the site in Potomac, has twice as many cars that go by it as the site in Potomac, has access to public transportation. And in Bethesda, there's a large segment of people who live in downtown Bethesda who don't have cars. So for them to get to Potomac to vote is quite the challenge. On the other hand, in Potomac, you have the highest rates of car ownership in Montgomery County. In a 10-minute drive, they can get to the executive office building in Rockville, and in a 20-minute drive, they can get to the Lawton Center in Bethesda.
Jim?
Our turnout has been dismal. Montgomery County's early voting and voting has been dismal. It's in the teens.
You're going to make it worse.
And our view is that bringing it to new communities will excite the electorate and bring out a bigger turnout. And don't forget, there's 9 sites, Bruce, from Damascus to Silver Spring. If you want an early vote, we have 9 sites in the county.
If every person, 100% of voting age population in Damascus were to vote, it would be roughly 10,000 people. You're going to get 10,000 people in Bethesda by the end of the 2nd day. There's no possible way that the lineup that the majority has chosen will improve turnout. If Jim really wants to improve turnout, we have no problem with having an early voting site in Potomac, but he should close the Damascus site where only 500 people voted in the 2014 primary.
I guess what I'm wondering, and perhaps Jim, you can give us some of the history of this, is the opening and closing of site. I mean, I realize early voting is somewhat new, but do we go through this every time? Is there always opening and closing and moving and shifting? Because one of the things I think the public likes is, 1, convenience, but 2, predictability, a sense of, oh, I go here because I went there last time.
Exactly.
But Bruce, the turnout was dismal the last elections. Our turnout is one of the lowest in the state.
So is this something that gets revised
yes,
and reviewed
every cycle, every 2 years.
And is there a financial imperative to, I mean, why not have 11? Why not add the 2?
The legislature is willing to propose 11.
I'd love that.
And I suggested to Jim that he should endorse that.
I do.
Okay, well, but you're only willing to endorse it in the context of leaving Bethesda out for now, and that makes no sense at all.
Well, he said a second ago he's willing to compromise. What do you think is fair? What do you think the path forward should be?
I think the path forward should be that we should restore Bethesda and Burtonsville, that we either should leave Potomac for later, or we add Potomac and take away Damascus because Damascus has so many fewer people than Potomac does. It is the lowest performing site of any of our sites.
But very geographically remote. I mean, you do want to help people for whom a long drive is an issue.
Right,
Yes.
but the people in Damascus have cars. The people in Bethesda often don't. And they are able to vote in Germantown.
Let me say about Damascus. A lot of our first responders, police, firefighters live in Damascus. It has a high Hispanic community, and it's at the northern ridge of our county. Geographic diversity.
And a lot of those early responders, in fact, maybe all of them, have cars. I haven't heard of an early responder who goes to an emergency on public transportation.
Is there a racial component in any of the closings? Because I saw some posts online over the course of the weekend suggesting that. Is that your view?
It is not my view that there's a racial component to the motivation behind it. I do think that the closing of the Burtonsville site does have an inordinate effect on African Americans, particularly African Americans in the Route 29 corridor, who 50 years ago couldn't buy homes in many parts of Montgomery County. And so when they're, it's one thing to say you have to live in the Route 29 corridor. It's another to then take away the services that, they've been an area that has been deprived of services for many years.
Jim Shallot.
Bruce, I'm willing to compromise with all the board members prior to the state meeting on Thursday.
Is this something that gets resolved prior to the Assembly? Because it seems like some members of the Assembly, which is controlled heavily by Democrats, they're itching to raise this matter
The State
again.
Board of Elections is meeting this Thursday.
I see.
They have to approve or disapprove our recommendations.
The regular part of the process is for the State Board to approve or disapprove our recommendations, and we are more than happy to see what the State Board says and proceed from there. But Jim is asking us to accept the disenfranchisement of millennials and senior citizens in Bethesda, and we're not interested in doing that. It's not exactly the same thing as disenfranchising the poor and minorities, but it's darn close.
I'll give you the last word.
Potomac never had early voting. They deserve it. They're an established community, make a lot of contributions. I have no objection to putting Burtonsville back and keeping Potomac. That's a personal
Tacoma Park has never had early voting. That doesn't mean that we automatically give every community who wants it early voting. We have to make decisions that are based on the needs of the whole county.
And I'm up on
We're bigger than 6 states. I would love the legislator to give us more early voting sites. That would be terrific.
Jim Shallot, David Naiman. Great conversation. Important issue. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Back with more News Talk in a moment.